everyone, version 6.0 is here, coming out very soon, and today we're going to be talking about the patch a bit more than just the balance changes, because there were some major changes to X-Rank and Salmon Run that I want to cover, and on top of that, in this same day, we got revealed triple Splashdown. It is in the game, and I'm going to break down everything we know about that, so stay tuned after the patch review to get my breakdown on that and how good I think it's going to be before we see it in 2 days. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy, and let's break down these changes. The 96 Gal Deco is getting a small ink consumption buff, being about 8% less ink hungry. There isn't too much to say here. It is a problem for Gal, so it does help it out a decent bit, but it's not that massive of a change. 96 Deco is in a good spot, and this will probably only improve it. After 2,786 days since a relevant range blaster got a buff in Splatoon 1 with light depletion, we finally have another range blaster buff. The explosion will paint the floor and wall by approximately 15% more if it explodes in the air. Yeah, so it's really not the most impactful buff, especially when you're getting Wave Breaker, which just isn't that good right now. However, if we get a better Range Blaster kit in the future, it'll be a bigger improvement. And hey, it is still a positive change. We'll take it. While this buff does sound small, it has one really nice application. It's more likely to paint over enemies when you hit them with the shot, making follow-up shots potentially a lot easier. That's pretty noteworthy. The Dread Ringer will have its ink consumed reduced by approximately 10%, basically giving you one more slot. Again, like with the range buff, will be something a lot more noticeable once it gets a different kit, but it is still a solid change, going from 10 to 11 sloshes. Finally, on the main weapon changes is the most relevant buff here, though, with the heavy edit spotting, which increased the number of spray droplets created by shots, which is really weird wording, but basically more droplets are going to hit the floor when you shoot the weapon. Therefore, this is a pretty solid painting buff. Edit has a few problems right now, mainly struggling against backline comps, and while I think that will still be a theme, its other major issue of tactical output should be fixed with this if this is at all decent, which I think will make heavy edit a lot more relevant to scene comps. As for special weapons, we have one change, and it is to Reef Slider. While the special isn't going to be faster on startup, you will be invincible 13 frames sooner, which is a decent buff. However, I gotta be honest, Slider is still in such an awful state. I don't think this is gonna help that much. It might make it work as a panic button a little bit more, but realistically, the problem has always been dying after the slider explodes. Realistically, that just isn't going to be any different. Points for special has two weapons, both of them just being special spam buffs, with L3 getting 190 for Crab and Jet Squelcher being 180 for Ink Vac, because yeah, we couldn't give it Burst Bomb to have fun with the main weapon, so we got to make it more of a special spammer. What a great way to buff the weapon. In terms of the balance changes, that is it. I think this is the worst patch this game has had. There is pretty much nothing relevant here, a lot of random nothing buffs, and there's just a lot more we could have done to weaker weapons, even if we didn't want to nerf things, despite Double Cooler being used a ton in Koshien. Regardless, nothing here is going to really change too much negatively. It's just they definitely could have done way more, and I think balanced patches really should be doing stuff to help especially more casual players have some interesting stuff to be able to look forward to, and this is more just changes for the top 0.0001% of players, which even then isn't enough to get those players excited. Anyway, on to the X-Rank changes. There's a lot here, so I'm just going to go over the main ones. Players with less than or more than 2000 X power will now be separated, no longer being matched together, basically making X-Rank have two systems. On top of that, this chart here shows the minimum change that you will get for wins and losses now in a series, which while it can potentially make just playing the game more inflate your X power a little bit, I think is overall a solid change that will make it a bit more fun to play. There will also be a few more badges. Oh, and before we get to the Salmon Run changes, it's worth noting you can exchange Sheldon licenses for Gacha machine rolls. That's definitely going to be useful. On to Salmon Run. Kraken Royale and Triple Splashdown are going to be added to Salmon Run. In addition to that, you will have at least 2 of the following specials made to attack salmonids at a distance. These being the Inkjet, Crab Tank, Killer Whale 5.1, Booyah Bomb, and Tri-Strike. So basically from now on, you will always have 2 of those 5 specials, and we have 2 new specials in the mode, which is awesome. On top of that, now, if you are an Executive VP and you have a Stage badge, you'll be able to start at a slightly higher rank. If you are the Bronze badge, unlocked at 400, you can start at 200. Silver, which is unlocked at 600, will start you at 300. And finally, having 999 will start you at 400. This is a great way to reward players who have grinded to be able to start at higher difficulties, as well as make getting to these higher EVPs less time consuming. The salmon meter for the Grisco boss will now change based on the type of king salmon head you have, which is pretty cool. On top of that, in Big Run, instead of the top 5% being gold, 20% silver, and so on, it will now be predetermined. A lot of people have been debating this change. I don't really care. So while the main balance changes might be kind of an L, it is pretty nice that outside of it, we got some really nice Salmon Run to X-Rank changes at least. So that's cool, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. In addition to this patch, we got the reveal of Triple Splashdown, which is something that got data mined recently, but we didn't really have any idea of how it worked, unlike the screen. Now that we have a bit of a video on it, here's everything that we know about it. This special summons 2 giant fists. These, however, are not invincible. It seems like they die to about 2 dually bullets, which means they probably have 50 HP, but it could be anywhere from around 40 to 60. The fists always spawn on both the top left and top right of you every time you use it. So if you're trying to splash down opponents, you can be a little bit further away from them to make sure the fists are somewhat in the way if they try to get up close to splashdown cancel you. The radius of the splashdown is actually slightly larger than it was back in Splatoon 2. It is worth noting that these fists land slightly later than the player. Now, you can still splash down super jump just like you could in Splatoon 2. However, it's worth noting that this does not spawn the fists. You only have the base splashdown if you use it this way. Finally, the splashdown has a little bit of a speed nerf. It's 10 frames slower just like it was in early Splatoon 2. And while it's only a visual thing, it seems like there's a little bit of a glow right before you go to the floor. Even the fists, which are pretty cool. And maybe this will be a good indicator of when you should be invincible. Though I guess the fist might not be invincible since one of them still died. There is still one big unknown though. In Splatoon 2, if you died in Splashdown, you only lost 25% of the gauge. Will this be the same case now, since more than likely your fists are gonna hit the floor? Would that drain the entire special and therefore all 3 of them need to die for you to keep the meter, or does it depend on whether or not you die? Because if so, then Tacticooler is going to be even better for this thing than it already was. Anyway, let's get to my analysis. I think the special is definitely still going to be on the weaker half, but it is a more than solid improvement and you're going to get decent value. Just because it's in the lower half of specials in this game doesn't mean it's not significantly buffed. Remember, even Reef Slider is better than a number of Splatoon 2 specials at the end of that game. The fact that this new Splashdown is still better than a sizable amount of ones in this game means it has been buffed up a pretty decent bit. The insane object damage could be very useful, especially since the fist lands slightly later, meaning you could potentially break the armor of something like a Booyah or a Crab and then kill it afterward. However, even more importantly is Splashdown jumps and cooler respawns. Tacticooler having maximum quick super jump could be insanely useful for Splashdown jumping to teammates, and if you do retain the special, you could pretty much get it immediately upon your respawn from a Tacticooler and then jump right into Splashdown again. While they do specify the special does more damage if you overlap multiple hitboxes, the base hit still seems to kill, so I think it's going to do a ton of damage even if you are getting part of it. So even if the special is susceptible to dying, it's much more likely you're going to get value out of it even if you do die, which is already a huge benefit. But on top of that, the more aggressive playstyle as well as Tacticooler Splatoon 3 provides gives a lot more ways it could be used even in that scenario. It still has plenty of flaws, and there's still going to be a lot of times you just die in it, and even if the splashdowns land, maybe they don't get any kills, or maybe it's not worth it. But I can see a lot more situations where this is absolutely going to be useful. Regardless, of course, it is still a special that isn't released yet, so we'll have to see what happens when it comes out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.